When you attach a hybrid system to an already powerful car like AMG's GT four-door, it goes up to 830 brake horsepower, 1400 Newton meters of torque, which are crazy figures. But then the craziest figure of them all is the weight, 2,380 kg in a four-door saloon. And this is part of the reason that we're slightly worried going into the future, because we are at the dawn of these ultra powerful hybrids now taking over the top billing spots of all of our favorite manufacturers. And this is really something that I wanted to talk about with you guys today, because it's not just AMG that are doing it with cars like this. Some of our favorite cars are about to be updated in the same way. For example, BMW's new M5 that I want to discuss with you today, and a few others that also are following the same trend. And the other side of today's video is talking about the quirks associated with living with and driving these cars, not just fast, but normally, because you might assume that they behave and act like your traditional combustion cars, but they've got a lot of little quirks, and I want to kind of impart those to you today. So it's a multifaceted video. Let's have a bit of a discussion. It's going to be cool. And of course, our subject today is AMG's 830 brake horsepower GT63E performance. So guys, today's episode of RBR is sponsored by G2A.com. G2A is an online marketplace where you can find huge savings on games, subscriptions, codes, and it works like any other online marketplace. Find a good seller and then hopefully you'll be able to find some massive savings. For example, G2A have their Xmas sale on at the moment and they've got some huge savings. For example, Mortal Kombat 1 that's just come out for almost 50% off. We've got Jedi Survivor for 56% off. And for example, we've got the new Street Fighter game here at over 50% off. And it's not just games, we're talking subscriptions like Netflix, software and apps, and cross-platform. So not just PC, can be PlayStation, Xbox, across everything as well. And it's all labeled properly so you know what works in your region and what doesn't. In addition to that, they've also started their advent calendar, and every day up till the 24th of December, you get an amazing deal on either some game or some software. So guys, just remember that it is a seller's marketplace. Find a good seller and make sure you're buying safe. Huge thanks to G2A for sponsoring today's episode, and thanks to you guys for always supporting our sponsors. Now, back to the episode. So guys, there is no more perfect car to talk about the dawn of this hybrid era than the GT63, because it has a fantastic standard pure combustion version, and it has the full-on hybridized version that you will see in a lot of manufacturers going forward as well. So you can directly compare these two different systems and what the end result is. Our standard GT63S 4MATIC Plus is a super powerful car at 635 brake horsepower, all coming just from the V8 with no hybrid assistance. 0 to 60 very quick at 3.2 seconds and a commensurate amount of torque as well. So it's not the type of car that you're left wanting. It's set a fantastic Nurburgring time and was the fastest four-door for the longest time on the Nurburgring as well. So really, really, really impressive car that I absolutely loved. Now, how do these hybrid systems work? Because they're quite similar across all of the brands. You of course have the combustion engine, which generally in all of these cars will provide the majority of the power. And then you have your battery and your electric motor. Where these are positioned, what size they are, what power they give, this is where the difference ends up being across manufacturers. In the GT, we've still got 630 odd brake horsepower from our combustion engine, and AMG have been quite clever with their hybrid setup. They have got a really, really clever EDU on the back. It's an electric drive unit that houses your limited slip differential, the 2-speed gearbox, and a permanently synchronous electric motor, all on the rear axle. And you've also got your AMG performance battery with batteries derived from the AMG 1 hypercar and F1 Learning, all sitting at the back. What this does versus your normal combustion car is actually give it a perfect 50-50 split on weight balance, which is great because our normal combustion one is slightly front heavy. Please bear in mind though, with this car specifically, the battery is not there for any type of electric range. I haven't seen any more than 4 miles being quoted to me on there. It's not for range or electric driving, even though you have an electric driving mode. It is purely for the e-performance side of things to give you more power. So range is out the window, at least where the GT63 is concerned. Now, those are impressive figures, right? 830 brake, 1400 Newton meters, etc. But the whole thing becomes a little bit skewed when you start talking about power to weight ratio. As we said, this is a heavy car. 2,380 kilograms makes it very heavy indeed. Now the standard GT63S has a power to weight ratio of 310 horsepower per ton, which is pretty damn impressive. Now this car, when you have the full power of 830, is much higher. It's at 350 horsepower per ton. But as we know, you only get that for 10 seconds at bursts. If we come down to the standard level of horsepower, which is around about 730 odd, then you've got a power to weight ratio less than the normal combustion car of 305. So normally, when you're normally just plodding around, the power to weight ratio is actually less than your combustion car. In a car that is, again, massive figures, 180,000 pounds and a lot heavier. This is where the problem lies. Who do we trust when it comes to performance cars other than these guys? BMW and Porsche. Porsche recently announced the Cayenne Turbo e-hybrid, the most powerful Cayenne ever, with 790 brake horsepower, 950 Newton meters of torque. Again, we've got a V8 with a hybrid system, with the V8 producing 571 brake horsepower and your hybrid producing around about 174. The cool thing about this car, it's got actually some decent electric range of around about, I think, 70 kilometers. Now, it probably doesn't surprise you to hear that Porsche does this hybrid thing the best. The Cayenne also almost has 800 brake, but as the Cayenne is lighter than its competitors anyway, adding the hybrid system only brings it on par with something like an X5M. So driving this thing, it still felt hugely dynamic, and it had a huge 70 kilometers of electric-only range, which puts the AMG to shame. So Porsche always standing as the light of hope, doing this thing better than anyone else. It's not just AMG and Porsche. We come to BMW. They recently did the XM, which we reviewed, and that is a hulking thing at 2.7 or 2.8 tons. It's probably the heaviest car that I've ever reviewed, and that's with, again, a V8 with a hybrid system. You compare that to a normal X7, and that's around about 2.5 tons. So again, you can see that kind of correlation. And as you saw when I drove it, it didn't feel as fast as the figures suggested, not at all. So you're kind of seeing these incredibly huge figures, but you need to realign your brain and say, that's fine, but actually, these days, power to weight ratio is way more important than the pure brake horsepower figure. Let's go to another BMW, one that we're all anticipating greatly, and that's the new M5, okay? We all know it's a hybrid. That's no new news to us, and we know that it's going to have a V8, probably with a very similar system to what we find in the XM, though this time I think we will have our electric motor on the rear alongside, hopefully, a smaller and lighter battery, would be my guess. Now, our standard G60 is a pretty decently weighted car at 1800 kg for the pure ICE version. If you look at our previous M5 and M5 CS, similar weight, sitting at around about 1800 kg. So if we're adding that 300 to 400 kg figure onto there, we're talking again of a car of around about 2.2 tons, maybe 2.3, getting very close to this GT63. Ooh, that's a heavy car, and we know BMW are very good at dynamics, but come on, they're not magicians, or are they? We will see. Again, you're going to wind up with a car with, yes, 790 odd brake horsepower, a big torque figure, etc. But will it be dynamic enough? Does that figure even matter? I don't know. I really don't know. Now, I'm being very negative because I've driven this GT63 performance in the past in Spain, and I came away unimpressed. But there is hope, because I drove another car with the exact same system, but much better in terms of how the car's body was handled, and that was the S63 performance. And I came away from that thinking, this is way more dynamic and so much fun versus the GT. And it was a fantastic car. Part of the reason was we had additional things in there like anti-roll stabilization, which was active. We had a carbon fiber casing around the even larger battery, but that actually helped with rigidity, and a bunch of other struts and braces that really made that car feel a lot more dynamic than I ever thought that it was going to be. But most of all, it was fun, and the whole thing kind of made a lot more sense. It even had a bit of electric EV range to plod around it. Then I look at other cars that are just ICE cars that have ballooned in weight. The one that really comes to mind is BMW's new M2, where you look at the figure and you're like, that's too heavy for an M2, it's too big for an M2, but you drive it and it is mind-blowingly good. And it's not just me that's saying that. You know, a lot more experienced people are echoing my sentiments with that car. So there is some hope on the horizon, but these are all topics that are up in the air at the moment, things I want to put in your mind as you watch other reviews from other people and you see news come up of hybrids, etc. These are the questions you really need to be asking yourselves. And now we're going to give this car a second go. I want to relay to you some of the quirks. We're going to see what it's like having lived with it for a week in UK roads rather than a short burst on a press trip, and see what AMG's currently most powerful car other than the AMG one is like. I like that, that's quite cool. So we've got a number of things that are unique to AMG hybrids within here that you guys kind of need to understand before we set off, because this is where some of the differences end up between your combustion car and this one. For example, the first of which is actually the startup. Now the car actually starts off in electric mode as standard, so if I turn it on now, you get the same sound as all the AMG EQ cars, like that EQE53 over there. Now one of the big benefits of this versus say an EV or AMG's 4-cylinder offerings is of course we've got the V8, so you get some nice sound out of these, as I'll show you now. You do get this really strange whistle as well. It kind of sounds like you got an owl in the bonnet. It's weird, I've never experienced that in another AMG V8. It must be some part of the hybrid system because you hear whistling while you're driving, as you'll see later as well. The other unique things are these, which I will show you when we're driving. It's the AMG performance displays that give you fantastic information, because these are highly complex cars. Just the torque management that AMG have done, where your EDU and your electric motor on the rear is like independent of your engine, so it's able to supply power to any of the wheels depending on how you're driving. It's so clever, but as the driver you kind of want to see what's going on, especially if something ever goes wrong. You need to know where it's happening, and in that regard these screens that they've given here, let me show you just the amount of detail that they give you. So we'll test this out while we're driving, but energy flow shows you exactly that, where the energy is flowing in terms of charging, where the power is going between the wheels. Then we've got the RPM and the torque between either the front and the rear, so your combustion and your hybrid element, which again, really useful information. Further information on electrics here. We've got temperatures on each part of the system. You know, all of this is super important. Then of course you've got your usual geometry, performance, etc. Interestingly, on engine sound, rather than the exhaust button, they've got a different icon here, which is the same as the EVs. So that's interesting. And that also turns on like an EV hum in the car as well. So we've got all these screens, which actually not all the manufacturers do. So it's really useful to have that information. And then a ton more in your driver zone as well. This middle one especially I love. Let me turn the car on for it. So what this does is it gives you an idea of, if I rev here, that's your combustion engine, the two middle bars, and then the top and the bottom bars relate to your EV power. So it's telling you how much EV power you're using at any given point and how much combustion power, and then when you start charging. Similarly with these bars on the right here, that lower bar gives you how much you're charging as well, so you get a lot of information. Then you can see the other screens we get, for example, the masses of information with regards to temperature, and the one that we are going to be keeping our eye on is the battery temperature here. We want that to stay around about 30 degrees while we're caning it later on, but I've never seen so many temperatures in an AMG display before. And again, this is all that hybrid element in this car that you kind of need to get used to as an owner, because none of this is in your combustion car stuff. And the other side of it is, of course, your range element. You can see we've got just over 75% of electric battery charge, around half a tank, which is only giving us 110 miles, albeit the fact that I have been driving quite fast. But MPG is something we will talk about, and anxiety about keeping that battery topped up because you need it for the performance. Haha, is the battery, which is not so hidden. Compared to the standard GT63, of course, you haven't got that. You've got a lot more luggage space in the back. That's not the case here, as you can see. And your rear bench also fixed, so you lose that element of practicality. And I think most of them are going to be the same. It's going to be hard to hide a large battery that has to give the performance and range that you need in these cars. Then we come to this thing. Another car YouTube channel that I personally love watching is The Throttle House. My friends James and Tom from there, and they did this great episode with the C63 where they talked about plugs are for butts, and I was laughing. It was great. But AMG have kind of given you what you want, guys, because look, we've literally got space for a butt plug in the GT63S. I've moaned about this extensively before, how this is the most hideous place that you could ever put an electric charging port. But now I understand why. It's because you boys asked for a butt plug, and AMG have delivered. in all seriousness though, that is the worst place. I know people say you're reversing into your garage, blah blah blah, but I personally like a bit of symmetry, and that ain't it, you know. The S63 had it correctly on the other side over there, which is where it should be. So yeah, that's a little hideous bit for a, you know, relatively small battery that you kind of have to live with. But now to head out, we're going to head out as you would, say, in the early hours, not to disturb your neighbours. This is one of the big benefits of this car. And we're going to head into electric only mode. How weird is that? And then take off. So how strange is this? Leaving your house in electric mode. Can you hear that? So strange, but it's already dropped from 4 miles to 2 miles range. We are not doing that. I can see the bar moving here. No, we're going to go into sport mode, which actually seems rather good at charging that up. So as you can see from the off, range anxiety is really a thing. But what I've done is, since we've been driving from home to where I'm going to do our driving segment, put the car into race mode, and we're almost back up to full battery charge now. So this is proving part of that point of the quick charging concept of the AMG Performance battery. The other thing I'm going to show you right now is that as we stand, the battery temperature is around about 31 degrees. We're of course going to start pushing the car now. Let's see at the end of that if it's maintained that with that when you or I are pushing these cars as they're intended to be driven. Now the most range anxiety I get is actually in comfort mode, where, as you can see ahead of us, the car is using electric more than it's using the combustion mode. So it all kind of makes sense that the battery level goes down. But mileage has been an issue. I've been averaging like 17 mpg, and I'm not blasting all the time, but it's such a heavy car. The hybrid element is so small, the weight is so much more, and the power is so much more that you end up with worse mpg than the standard car. And I think as a buyer, you come into it thinking, yeah, I'm getting hybrid, going to get better miles per gallon. No, you're not. Like, it's a lot worse. I want to start by talking about the good things, and there are good things. There are things that differ to your combustion cars. The first of those is throttle response. You even tap that pedal and you get immediate power. Like, there is, like, even if you think about touching the pedal, you get power. That's how eager it is. I mean, and it's kind of weird if you're used to your AMG V8s, because where you normally, let's say we go into Sport Plus mode, you normally be able to like give it some revs and come off for, you know, a few bangs, but you wouldn't get thrust forward that much because it's just a combustion engine and it kind of knows what you're doing. This system is like, he wants power, give him power, and you're like rocketed into the distance even with the slightest tap. Now I've touched on the topic of power. To discuss power, we have to show you launch control. Got the race box here. Let's see what it does on launch. Oh my God! What? I forgot how flipping fast this car is. 2.9 seconds 0 to 60. That feels way faster than that. There is no lag. The amount of grip you get when this thing launches is insane. I feel like my innards have been rearranged. That is faster than, I mean, it feels faster than any EV that I've experienced with regards to a launch control. So let me tell you, when it comes to speed, when it comes to throttle response, you feel invincible in this thing. Bring on the EVs, bring on whatever the hell you want. The GT63E Performance is an absolute monster of grip and power. It delivers and it delivers and it delivers. And sometimes it feels like you've left the ground and you're flying. That's just how quick it is. If it wasn't for the fact that you've got such heavy, this is the heaviest steering I've ever felt in an AMG. I think it actually helps with a car of this size and weight. What really surprises me is how dynamic this is. I think they've really improved this car since I drove the press car. I must say that, because I definitely remember a massive issue in terms of grip, which this thing doesn't have, especially from zero. Handling, as I said, the steering, very heavy. It is communicative, very much so, which is good. And when you've got nice smooth roads like I have right now, the car actually doesn't feel that heavy when you're doing dynamic movements. Where the car becomes unhinged is when you have any kind of uneven surface, and then you very, very quickly become aware of the car's weight. The way the car kind of bobs up and down, loses its focus, the wheels begin to squimmer and look for grip, that's when this car kind of betrays its weight. That's why I've been keeping the car, instead of in comfort, even in normal driving, in Sport Plus, to keep it as rigid as possible. Because rigidity really here is the key with these weighted cars. As I found with S63, that I was pushing that car really hard, harder than this, and it was completely unflappable. So yeah, I definitely recommend staying in Sport Plus. The other thing that really helps with regards to weight and the size of this car is the rear wheel steering that we get, which makes the car feel just smaller than it is. Of course, we're used to that in the standard GT63, but it makes even more difference, I feel, in this car. In fact, the car is so fast, it's blown half my hair away. Look, I've got a haircut suddenly. Actually, no, I just stopped for a haircut. But yeah, the dynamism of this thing, this is actually really an improved product, I think, over what I drove in Spain. That car struggled with grip. It didn't feel as dynamically sorted as this one does. The limit, I'm still kind of like, holy crap, this is a heavy car, and you kind of feel the body roll like fighting against you and the tyre grip worsening. But that's just part and parcel of A, the fact that you're coming in with more speed than you would be in any other car. And then secondly, just the pure weight figure. You can't get away from the physics. And just check this out. If we come back to my whole battery anxiety thing, a lot of you asked if you're driving that fast, you can lose battery. Look at that. It's gone to full, and we've been in race mode, spanking this thing as hard as we can, and it's got a full battery. Yes, the fuel level's gone down, and then we check our temperature on this side, and it's perfect. It's at that 31, 32 degree that AMG said it would be, despite us pushing it and charging it and drawing from it. The temperature is exactly where it should be. Perhaps then my idea around the power to weight ratio isn't that relevant, because you don't need 100% of the power all the time. Maybe when you're coming out of the corner, maybe higher speeds, you want that full 830 brake, because as far as I can see, that battery just isn't going to diminish if you're driving fast. If anything, it diminishes when you're driving slower. So the performance concept, actually bloody impressive in terms of keeping that AMG performance battery charged. The GT 4-door is a slightly older product where this system has been installed into. A future car where it's built with this in mind could be really, really good. But managing your speed and your braking and your body control, you can have a lot of fun with this, and I've had more fun driving this fast than I had while driving it slow. In fact, driving it slow has been a bit cumbersome in that regard, that I just feel the weight more, and that's not something I felt, for example, in the S63 performance. So there is hope here. Dynamically, it actually feels very similar to the standard car, and I came into this review, and this is something that car journos are guilty of. We come into cars when we're filming 5 a week with some preconceptions that I'm going to say this about this car probably. But I've had to re-engineer my thinking here, because this car is actually better than the last car I drove. It feels very similar to the standard GT63 dynamically. I think my main issue is that it feels so similar in that regard to the standard one, which is probably 50 grand cheaper, and on the used market probably 100 grand cheaper. I keep saying that the standard car, the GT63S, is better, and I maintain that, okay? It feels as fast, particularly dynamically speaking. It's telling that AMG haven't done a lap of the Nurburgring with this, because they should have, or I should say that they probably would have if it had the capability of beating the normal combustion car. So that's telling. But that's with the luxury of having something like the combustion car still available to buy. Imagine a future, which isn't far away, of a car like this or the M5, where the only option you have is the hybrid one. In that scenario, like the S63, and somewhat like this, if you're still performing at the levels of the pure combustion cars, but with the hybrid element, then at least we have our wonderful combustion engines still around for the next few years. What I'm not happy about is the price, where at 180,000, And at that level, it's a different customer base. It's a different market. So you're going to have to expect very different, and I mean by different, I mean lower sales figures. It's just inevitable. So I hope they sort the pricing out, and that's for all the brands, not just AMG. Let's see what the new M5 costs. What I really want to see is a car that's cheaper, slightly lighter, and using this same system with the V8. As for these heavy hybrids, as I said, it is the dawn for them, and I'm not ready to write them off yet. There's a lot of cars to come and a lot of development to happen. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of RBR, my second drive of the GT63, and our chat about the powerful hybrids of the future. If you have enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.